Welcome, everyone. I am Kevin Molesworth, CSEP. The Northwest Event Show is a place where event professionals come together to share the latest news, have conversations, and ideate about what's next. Today, our topic, Ignite Creativity. I want to tell you a little bit of the background on this. When Stuart reached out to me and said they were having a conversation about creativity, he said I was the first person he thought of. I was honored. I was excited. To me, creativity is all about the novel and the useful, the original and the meaningful. And so before we get started, I'm going to kick it over to Jackie, who's going to give a shout out to our sponsors.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Narina with the Northwest Event Show, and thank you so much for tuning in. I want to thank our partners and our sponsors today. First off, we're going to thank the Search Foundation. The Search Foundation was created by event professionals for event professionals. They provide financing help for event, meeting, and catering professionals in crisis. So this last year, they couldn't have been a better fit for us to push forward. You can show your support and text to give the word NWES to 44321. Now, this conversation is brought to you by SHW. They are an award-winning full-service event agency based in Seattle. They design and deliver high-impact events and experiences all around the globe, both large-scale, in-person gatherings, and digital broadcasts just like this one. Project Bionic, they create strategic, customized roadmaps for growing authentic relationships between company and community that convert leads into customers and customers into advocates. And let's just say it, and we all need advocates, right? Now, MC Event Consulting is a team of professionals committed to excellence-driven, sustainable event management. A big shout out to Mark Catuno, which we all know has come on the Northwest Event Show. We want to say hello, Mark. Now, Kevin, why don't you take us away? Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much, Jackie. And now let's introduce our panel. First of all, we have Michelle Lane Lawson. She is the Associate Vice President, Head of Design at Next Gen Experience for the National Basketball Association. We've got Damani Daniel, Chief Imaginator and the original event nerd. And we've got Bobby Dutton, Director of GBM6, Groove Boston Mission 6. So now let's start with you, Michelle. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be here. As you mentioned, I'm the head of design for the NBA's Next Gen Experience Group, and we're responsible for reimagining and designing the NBA's entire suite of digital products. So that includes our mobile apps, iOS and Android, tablet, connected devices, and the website. Before I joined the NBA, I had a pretty nonlinear career path. I worked across a range of different industries, from advertising to experiential marketing, branding, and so on and so forth. So for me, it's always about following the type of work that inspires me and not necessarily a specific industry. So, I love to make things. I love to bring ideas to life and create experiences for people. So this is just a really exciting time for me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. Now let's kick it over to Damani in Dallas. Tell us a little bit about yourself there, boss.
Good to see you, everyone, and thanks for having me on. So my name is Damani Daniel. I am the Chief Imaginator at the Event Nerd, and if that's a title you don't know, that's because I made it up when I started the company. We started the company about 9 years ago, according to LinkedIn. Actually, it was 9 years ago last week, according to LinkedIn, so huzzah there. And we are a boutique production management and creative production agency. When I say boutique, I don't mean that we do small stuff, because the stuff that we do isn't small. It's that we get to be unique in how we choose our clients and the clients that we get to work with, the clients that we're privileged to work with, and also the approach. We always want to look at things through an artistic lens. Our team is a team of creative and technological misfits. I call them the nerd herd, and they are people who come from theater and restaurant life and the music industry, and we all get put into a room and come up with some really, really amazing experiences. I also am privileged to be the host of Casually Creative, so this is kind of my thing, which is a podcast where we talk about how creativity is manifest in all of our lives in ways that we don't expect. And I'm privileged to serve the city of Dallas as the District 6 Arts and Culture Commissioner for the city of Dallas. So basically what I'm saying is creativity, art, technology, that's kind of what I do. And whether it's an IRL experience or a URL experience, we love creating those every single day. Really happy to be here.
Thank you so much. We're excited to have you here, and I did hear the news of your recent your giving back to the city in that role. That's fantastic. Kudos to you.
Thank
Love
you.
to see that. And last but certainly not least, Big Bobby D over there in Boston. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Bobby.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Bobby Dutton, GBM6. I'm about making people happy through legendary events, and I live kind of on the intersection of technology and emotional impact. And that's been kind of my thing. We first burst onto the scene 15 years ago to make DJ shows bigger than concerts by saying we're going to consider the artist an interesting part, but also a limiting factor. What if we spent our attention on the show, the experience, the audience impression, and then put a DJ on stage that could play any version of any song from any artist in history. And suddenly we really were taking things to the next level, particularly on college campuses. Then we started doing artist-centric tours as well, but with the same focus on the emotional impact and the audience side of things. And then I don't know if you noticed, but last year a worldwide pandemic threw us all a bit of a curveball, and we had to get creative with how to pursue that mission of making people happy, and came up with some interesting ways to deliver and to stay relevant. I've also got some experience speaking on subjects like process efficiency, communication, work-life balance, aggressive time management. And you might have seen me at some of those ILEA special event type conferences, and hopefully we'll be seeing everyone again there as well. I'm also on the board for ILEA and the Search Foundation, so thanks for your support there. But yeah, pumped to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Oh, what a diverse group. I love it. Well, let's jump right in. Let's talk about creativity with the big, broad question, what does creativity mean to you? And I'm going to start you off there, Michelle.
Oh boy, that's actually a hard question for me. But I think that creativity, is just doing things in a different way. You know, I have friends that say, well, I'm not creative. I can't do this. I can't be involved in this. And I think that everyone is creative to a certain extent, you know. I think that just using your mind and imagining things in a slightly different way, or looking at things in a different from a different point of view and expressing yourself that way, I think that that's creativity. It really does touch everything in our lives. So that's what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I love it. What about you, Damani?
You know, about a year and a half ago, I all of a sudden was stuck in this place where I was having a hard time embracing the fact that I was creative, right? Because I didn't ever grow up. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. And so I wasn't finding myself being artistic. And I was falsely equating artistic to creative. And then I read a magazine, Time magazine put out a whole issue on creativity and sent me down a very, very deep rabbit hole of just reading and watching anything I could about creativity. And then I stumbled across a statistic that a buddy of mine, Byron Sanders, who's the CEO of a great nonprofit here in Dallas by the name of Big Thought, that focuses on the arts and creativity for youth. And he found a statistic that said that by 2030, so we're in level set, by 2030, so we're in 2021 right now, by 2030, over 75% of the jobs that exist don't exist right now. What that said to me is that creativity is more than about what you can paint or what you can write or what you can draw or what you can sculpt. Creativity is going to be the very engine that drives everything. So what is creativity? Creativity is everything. Creativity is the ability for a single mom or dad to be able to make sure that their kids get to all the things that they need to get to and that they have a great time doing it. Creativity is the architect designing the building. Creativity is the event producer who's designing the elements of the experience. Creativity is literally what fuels everything that we do. And the false dichotomy of I am creative or I'm not creative needs to be erased, because it's not I am or I'm not, it's how am I expressing my creativity.
Yeah. Bingo, absolutely. I love that you made that point. So often we associate the word creativity with artistic endeavors and aesthetics, but that's not true. I mean, black holes, somebody had to come up with that idea. Somebody had to think divergently and come up with that. So yeah, it's in every single day of our lives for every person. How am I going to get to my kid to soccer practice when I got to get my other kid over to, you know, his rehearsal for the play? Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah.
Bobby, what about you? What does creativity mean to you?
Sure. So let's get kind of literal with it. I mean, it's creating value. It's building a cohesive whole that's better than the sum of its parts. So if you were to go buy a car, why did you go buy that car instead of buying some tires and some rims and some seats and a steering wheel and an engine? Because the car is more than those things put together, and you needed someone's expertise and decision making to create that whole. And I think it's fascinating to look at like the scope of creativity, because it can happen anywhere. The person that makes a song needs a really good drummer or a snare drum sample or vocalist or microphone, and every layer can be zoomed in and expanded into creative need. And as events people, I think the best thing we can do is source the right elements, identify some of the building blocks, and then empower the right partners to go even deeper into each of those building blocks, and then bring it all back together in a way that makes the car. And it's fascinating, and I think we've all seen that magic when it comes back together, and you're like, oh my God, we made something that has nothing to do with these parts, and it's just so much more.
Yeah, fantastic. And it really couldn't be more apropos for our industry as events, right? I don't care if you're the best event producer in the world, you didn't do it alone. I mean, there are hundreds of people who are all involved, and they might not all get the spotlight, but they are all equally important. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Bobby. So now what I'm going to do, this question is actually specifically for Damani, and you teed it up perfectly for me. So you're an accomplished event producer, and as you said, up until just a short while ago, you didn't think of yourself as a creative person, right? But, I mean, for years, I've known you like 10 years. You've always been like the tech guy. And to me, I've saw it as creative because tech is new. Every single day, there's something new. You know, it's constantly evolving. So I've always seen you as creative. But now that you have this new perspective, this new lens, how much of your success do you think is owed to your creativity?
You know, it's a great question. I mean, all of it, right? It's, you know, one of my favorite podcasts is How I Built This, and at the end of it, they always ask how much of your success is attributed to luck and how much of it's attributed to hard work, and the answer is yes, right? Because it's not one or the other. Yes, there is an aspect of a significant aspect of creativity that has been inherent and baked into everything that I've done. But there's also been the hard work. There's also been blessings and grace and fortune and family have all contributed to it. But creativity does lie at the center of it, right? Because in order for me to be able to do any of the things, create any of the concepts, design any of the things and bring them together, I have to have an understanding of not just my creativity, but an understanding of the creative boundaries, the creative limits, the creative expressions of the people and the teams that are around me. So it's not just that creativity has contributed to my success or that my creativity has contributed to my success. It's that the creativity of the vendors and the partners and the team members that I'm alongside every single day, all of that creativity contributes not just to my success and to the Event Nerd success over the course of the past 9 years, but contributes to their individual success as well and their creative wins.
Yeah, great. Well said. So now let me do another broad question. This one I want to go to everyone. I'm going to start with you, Bobby. How do you nurture your creativity?
Sure. I like to kind of explore and seek out those moments where that magical, that emotional feeling gets evoked. You know, anytime you get those chills or the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, it's interesting to stay there and also ask the question, what's happening right now? Why is this moment so magical? Is it something I'm seeing? Is it something I'm feeling? Is it a smell? Like, what are all these parts? And then my engineering nerd mind likes to really try to track it down and figure out why this magical thing is resonating quite the way it is. And then take that lesson back and translate it into some creative project that may have nothing to do with that experience at all, and just acknowledge the fact that that's the kind of surprise resonance we're trying to spark in people with events and with creative projects in general.
Yeah. And what about you, Michelle? How do you nurture it? Is there any sort of mental calisthenics or anything that you do to keep yourself fresh and pushing and always coming up with bold ideas?
Yeah, all the time. I used to work in events, and now I work primarily in front of a computer and a laptop. And I'm very much of the mind that in order to nurture creativity and to stay inspired, you need to move yourself. You need to be in different, and I need to be in different environments. And so I need to step out of this work area. I need to get out. You know, I'm a photographer and I DJ. I have a lot of things that I, you know, need in order to feel balanced. So it's all part of it, because I can't get into, you just can't say, well, I need to solve this design problem and then sit at a computer and then it comes. Like, it doesn't work that way for me. I need to free my mind, free my spirit, and get out. I mean, I'm in New York, so it's a great place to be for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of inspiration on the streets, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
What about you, Damani? How are you nurturing things?
It's cliche to say my kids, right? But that's true. It's interesting to watch how they interact with the world, because they interact with the world as the world should be interacted. And what I mean by that is I watched my 5-year-old walk up to the TV to select a movie on Netflix, and he went to touch the screen, because that makes sense, right? It makes sense that you should be able to touch the screen on your TV and it should do a thing. But it doesn't, and it's not because the technology has been limited, it's because we've limited the technology. And so a phrase that I heard a good friend of mine, Katie Borer, say actually just yesterday, she said, you can't express what you don't ingest, which is to say, you can't have creative thought if the only thing that's feeding your creative engine is yourself. And that doesn't just mean that you watch the things or read the things that are creatively inspiring to you. It's you watch all the things. She and I got into a conversation yesterday about the movie Cruella, and she told me all the things that she liked. And then I said, okay, what didn't you like about Cruella? And she had to think about it, because people don't ask those questions. They don't ask what you didn't like, but what you don't like informs your creative process and your creative thought process as much as what you do like. So what helps me is to look at what my friends are doing in all industries, and to remember that there is inspiration from everywhere. My grandfather had an adage, he told me all the time. I clearly like adages, right? My grandfather used to say, subscribe to one magazine every year that has nothing to do with anything that you do. I subscribed to a plumbing magazine that year. It taught me things about how you can be creative, but about plumbing. And let's be clear, I am not a plumber. Don't give me a wrench. It's not gonna work out well for anybody. But those kinds of things, what are these things that you can read that seem super random? And it also makes you great at cocktail parties, you know, when those come back again.
That's awesome. But that's a really great point, because, you know, there's been studies on this that people who, one of their personality traits is openness, right? If you expose yourself to diverse input, you ingest it, goes up. They always say, go take a trip to some foreign city where you don't know the language and immerse yourself in that culture. And you are going to learn a lot from that. That's fantastic. Yeah. And kids definitely love watching how kids discover things and solve problems and build a makeshift ladder to get to the cookies on top of the refrigerator. That's creative. No, that all right, now this question, it's a real thing. So this question is going to be specifically for Michelle. So thinking of the NBA, right? Now, we all know people, the fans of the NBA, they go crazy, and we've talked about this before. Sure, I can watch it on TV, but man, I'd really much rather be there in person. And obviously, during the pandemic, couldn't be there, you know, so it changes the interaction. So what are you doing? What is you and your team doing to bring that energy and that excitement through, you know, with design and technology?
Well, I love this question. Thank you for asking me this. It's great. You know, as I mentioned, we are currently working on our digital products and you know, pushing what we can do through technology in this next phase of the ecosystem of digital. But for me, it's super important that, you know, an app is utility. People go to it to not only watch the game, but to get information. But first and foremost, it was important for us as a design team to really like harness that energy through not just the video that we're streaming, but through the other areas of the app, and say, this feels like the NBA. Like this, I open this app and it feels like the NBA and there's energy everywhere. You know, at a high level, because I can't get into specifics yet, we are leveraging technology, because the truth is that a lot of people will never be in an arena, right? But they love the NBA. So it's important for us to give that experience to our fans and have like that live game feeling, even though it might be in a small viewport, to be able to harness that and give that to them, as well as give them the information. Because, we're building this for them. We're not building this for us.
Yeah, yeah.
And
so true. So, anything we can do. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just saying there's so much more to it. But it's challenging. It's exciting. Every year technology changes, so there's more power that we have to merge like that live game with the technology, which you'll be seeing next year.
Yeah. What would be great is if you could do some sort of like, help me out here. What's it called, Damani, when it's holographics? Maybe I could see the game right in my living room. Like, there's little Yeah. Are you guys working on that? Because that would really make my life easier.
We should talk. We'll talk. And then you can give me some of your ideas.
All right. I'll bring the ideas.
And I'll take your team.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's fine. Damani will bring the technology, and then we'll have a sick halftime show with Bobby and his people. I love it. That's great. Okay. We're not working. Okay, here's what we're going to do, y'all. We're going to take a quick little break here, and then we're going to come back and answer some more questions. What I want to do is I want to kick it over to our fantastic partners with the Search Foundation. We got some words here from the Search Foundation's chairwoman, Kate Pate.
Hi guys, Kate Pate with Search Foundation. Excited to be joining you again today. Search Foundation is a 501c3 for our industry, by our industry. We help event individuals that are in crisis, and there's a lot of ways that you can help as well. Visiting searchfoundation.org, donating with the text to give simply by texting the word search to 44321. You can purchase one of these great heart pins to wear at all of your upcoming events, or follow along online for part of the story. Our goal for 2021 is to continue to distribute funds to event industry professionals that are in crisis. So visit searchfoundation.org today.
Thank you so much, Kate Pate, and to the Search Foundation for all the wonderful work that you do for the events industry. Now, let's jump back into the conversation. So, this one is for everybody. I want to talk about creativity and emotional impact. Think for a moment about how those two things are connected, and maybe if you have some examples, some anecdotes of like a specific thing that you did, that you created fully for the idea of creating an emotional connection to your audience. I'm going to start with you, Bobby.
Okay, here we go. So I think it's been a lot of pressure to be creative, especially given all the new challenges and limitations and stress that's been introduced to all of us lately. Everyone tried to do some virtual events. We've all got a lot of experience with streaming things and watching things on screen. I was asked to do a virtual DJ performance for the Search Foundation, which was great. But the thing that I was kind of concerned about as far as creating that authentic emotional impact was if I'm just DJing in my basement in sweatpants, like with music not too loud, I don't want to bother the neighbors, you're going to see that. You're going to get not sweaty, happy performance. You're going to get, this is a guy that's a little bit lonely that's been in his house for 4 days straight. And I'm not totally believing that this is legendary energy. So we had to think differently. Our creative approach to solving that problem was to say, okay, if we're trying to capture real energy, we have to make sure there is real energy in the room before we worry about communicating it and how it gets out there. So luckily, a lot of venues were sitting empty collecting dust. So I called Dave Lombardo, who owns a nightclub, said, hey, can I come in DJ in the nightclub with all the lights on and all the speakers on, nobody in the room except me, you, and a VJ. And we did an authentic, actual performance with 3 humans in a giant room. And we were screaming and sweating and having an absolute blast. And it really made the show work, which was great. Then we had content worth sharing. On top of that, we acknowledged we were coming to meet the audience where they were. And they're also sitting alone on a laptop in their house a lot of the time. And it might be unrealistic to expect them to stand up and dance and get crazy. So we wanted to make sure there was a way for them to connect emotionally, even if that's where they were. What we did that was hopped on the chat during the playback And if you were trying to take information in through text or through words or trying to have some dialogue, in addition to just having cool music, cool visuals, great energy, we said, okay, well, here's what's happening musically now. At 2/3 of the way into the set, we're starting to do less vocals and more major key stuff. Here's why. Here's how we're trying to make this visceral and accessible. Here's what remix this is and why we chose that. And just kind of offering this like pop-up video layer of value. And some people really needed that. And so what we ended up with was a creative program with different ways to get on board based on where you were emotionally so that we could make an authentic connection together. And that to me was a real turning point for having an interesting twist on virtual.
Yeah. And now, Michelle, over to you. Same question, essentially. Is that something that, again, your team thinks about beyond just, sports are exciting by their very nature. They're exciting and they're fun, right? But is it emotional? Are you thinking about the sort of raw emotional connection? And what sort of role does that play in your conversation with your team?
And I can speak even beyond my current position. I studied psychology before I went to art school. So I'm always thinking about how an experience makes, a user, if we're talking about digital, or a person feel when they interact with it. Like, first of all, how do you want that person to feel when they see your design? Start from there. So when I was designing interactive installations, that feels a little bit more immersive. Do you want to draw someone in? What colors do you use? And by doing that, you create an emotional connection. So that extends, to the NBA. Does it feel alive? Does it feel like there's energy? How are you harnessing that? How are you serving that to the fan when they open the app experience? But that's been a thread throughout every project that I worked on. And I love that. If someone looks at something that you designed and they don't feel anything, even if it's not specifically what you wanted them to feel, then that's a miss, in my opinion. Especially now in digital, people have short attention spans. So all of that is constantly on my mind, and that is a driver for everything that I do, just broadly speaking.
I love that. Behavioral science, psychology, you're right. Everything we do should be eliciting something, right? You might love it, you might hate it, but man, indifference, that's a dud. I need you responding to it. That's amazing. So now over to you, Damani. And by the way, for those of you watching, Damani's got his headset on partially because he's just cool, but he's literally in the middle of calling a massive 3-day show right now. He's hiding in his production office, responsible for this massive show. So
there's crew. The team is all around me building out the last few elements of the show. So it's true.
And they're doing it.
Say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Oh wow, y'all are the worst.
You can tell they work hard, and you need to give them a break.
This is real life. What we do has to ultimately be about human impact. Because why are we doing it? Really, why are we doing it? One of the things that I'm trying to even move our team away from is talking about these online experiences as virtual experiences, because virtual says that it's not real. Virtual says that it's not tangible, but it is, right? Even though we may be on a screen, it's still a real event. So we've taken to start, for example, calling them IRL, in real life, or URL experiences. And one of the things that we've discovered and that we're really leaning into when it comes to the URL experiences, why does it just have to be flat? Why does everything about the URL experience have to be some level of an upgraded Zoom room? There's a phrase that came to me, and it was, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. We've all experienced it. But it's not a real thing? ESPN fatigue. I'm not a sports guy, right? I'm not, but my wife is the sports person in our house. And she can watch, Sports Center, and you hear that, da-da-da, but it's the same thing every 45 minutes. No one, after watching 3 sports centers, is like, oh my gosh, that is far too many sports centers today. But after your first and a half Zoom meeting, you're upset. You're upset because it has sucked your soul dry. But what fundamentally is the difference? A Zoom meeting is on a screen. Sports Center is on a screen. There is content being shared in a Zoom meeting. There is content being shared on Sports Center. What's the difference? The difference is design. The difference is that Sports Center is trying to bring you in and tell you a story, whereas Zoom meetings are just trying to push content to you. Sports Center is trying to incorporate you into the narrative so you feel like you're a part of it. So one of the ways that we're always looking at how do we create those moments of emotional engagement is how do we blur the line between the IRL and the URL. Two examples. One, we were privileged to be able to produce an event for Sally Beauty Holdings and Cosmoprof in October of last year. And we went from, let's create an online event to, okay, it's October. Nobody's working in our industry really anyway. Nobody's working in your office. What if we came into your office and built a physical set, put you on the physical set, turned your building, your corporate headquarters into a control center to push out to 4,000 of your closest friends, of your leaders? What does that look like? The physicality of the set made it feel more real, and it wasn't just a virtual background. This set for me is staged. I absolutely designed this so that you would look at it when I was in the frame, without question. So leaning into that in how we design physical sets for URL experiences, IRL sets for URL experiences is powerful. The second thing is, how do you layer elements into the URL experience that make it feel more IRL? We were privileged a couple of weeks ago. We launched a brand new virtual event studio in Dallas, first of its kind in Dallas. And so our first event out the gate was actually with the Dallas Mavericks. We did the Dallas Mavericks Ball, their annual fundraiser. And again, we built a physical set here in our studio, but then the client layered on an additional element where their top sponsors got an experience. They got an event. That event included a catered meal by our friends at Low Country Cuisine. It included custom cocktails by Patron. It included decor. All of this dropped off at their house. And so what you got was, when people were taking pictures of them watching this virtual URL event, they were doing it from their homes. They had invited friends over that were in their quarantine camp. They invited their friends over. They're drinking. They're enjoying themselves. Were there 1,000 people in one room together raising money? No. Did those people in pods of 10 or 5 or 3 or 2 for date night still have a dynamic experience? Yes. And most impactful is the fact that this virtual event raised over $800,000 with nobody seeing each other besides the people that were in their room. So how do you create emotional impact? You lean into the things that people already love. They love congregating. They love getting together. They love text-based communication. Chat's a real thing. Lean into those things, make them better, and make the friction less. And when you do that, the emotional experience can't help but happen. We don't have to do anything. We have to get out of the way and let people create the experiences for themselves.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now, it's interesting because all of you have touched on this. Again, the emotional components, psychology, behavioral science, et cetera, in one way or another. And I think a lot of times, part of the reason that people who aren't in the events industry, they give us that terrible name of party planner, is because they don't understand that we are thinking about strategy. We are thinking just beyond the tables, the chairs, the linens, all that good stuff. So I'm gonna go down the line again for all of you on this one. I'll start off with you, Bobby. What do you do when your client or a boss or someone who doesn't really exist in our world, doesn't really understand it, they come to you with their idea? How do we bridge that gap and say, yeah, I get it, guy up on stage giving a speech asking for money, but that's not the $1 million idea. That's not, there's no connection to emotion. How are you using creativity to redirect, whether it be an event, a product that, is being launched, whatever? How do you use creativity to take their idea, which might not be that great, and make it great?
So my favorite thing is I'm lucky enough to have a lot of trust with a lot of the clients that I get to work with. I haven't seen an itemized list in over a decade. So they're not saying, hey, Bobby, I need 13 of this particular Martin Mac Viper profile fixture. I need 60 feet of truss over here. These are the colors we want to use. It's much more vague than that, especially during COVID times. I had clients coming to me saying, we made students come back to campus. It's our job to engage them. None of the programs we're used to doing are allowed to happen right now. Can I give you some money? And it's like, okay. And so it's totally different. And I like to translate that same lack of an itemized list to the vendors that put it together. So we kind of have this broad emotional target. And I love, Damani, what you said, lean into what people love. What I found myself doing in the last year was lean into what people need, because we're closer to survival mode than we have been for a while. And so the overarching theme of the events that I've been working on lately have been the fact that people need to feel like everything's going to be okay, or at least they need to feel that things aren't dangerously terrible all the time. And we've all been carrying some level of real survival stress constantly. And so some of the stuff that we were working on, when you get down to the actual nuts and bolts of what it is, it's very vague. Which was, I was nervous. I was like, yeah, usually we do this concert with, we're going to have this 15-minute opening act, and then this announcement and the sponsor thing, and then this big theatrical moment, and it's all super dialed in. And now it's like, we're going to build this really big, complicated space for people to come into and feel like everything's okay. And they're like, how much does that cost? What are they doing again? It's like, don't worry about it. They're going to feel safe. And that's the product. And I was like, oh my God, I'm taking all this money and I have no idea what we're even doing here. And it was a big relief, because before we were even halfway through the first event of this nature, the client came in and said, hey, they want to do this again. I said, oh, you want to like extend the end time? They said, no, we want to do it again, twice as big, in 2 weeks, right here. We'll find the money, do whatever you want. This is exactly what they needed. And most importantly, they didn't know what they needed. And the best client feedback I got this year was after the show, the last stuff went back on the truck to load out. And he said, Bobby, thank you. I didn't know what I needed, but that was exactly it. Let's do this again sometime, which is so satisfying. So I think when it comes to engineering emotional deliverables, it's all about avoiding specifics at all costs. Yeah, you eventually need to figure out what equipment needs to show up, but that's so far away from the actual product or agreement. It's just going to slow you down if people come in with too specific of an idea too early in the process.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for that. And now I want to kick it over to you, Michelle. Again, same question, whether it be in your current role or other roles that you've held in the past. Somebody comes to you with a small idea, and then you're going to use your creativity to make that big or different or better or, whatever. How does it, I don't know, what examples do you have of that?
Well, I would say, typically in the past, what would happen when I was actually working with clients is that, we would come up with ideas, present them, and then worst case scenario, a client would say, no, I really want this thing. And it's so far from what you've presented and what you think is best for the product or, the audience, whatever it will be. And I think you asked, how do you use creativity in that way? I'm like, to sell an idea, you have to be creative, not just in the concept, but how you present it and sell it through and tweak it without it losing its integrity. So currently, I don't have clients, but I do have stakeholders and decision makers and people who aren't necessarily, tied to, the creative field. And so it's education, it is saying or instilling that confidence in the fact that this is what you were hired to do. This is your understanding of the brand. And this is what you're saying is, the best path forward. And I mean, I don't even know, it's taken like 20 years for me to still, figure out how to be creative to sell ideas through to, stakeholders and clients, et cetera. I know that's very broad, but there's so many examples from, like advertising to experiential marketing to product design. It happens every day, Yeah.
I mean, and I get that. That's the nature of it. I mean, the CFO of a Fortune 500 company is probably not super creative, but that's okay. That's their job. I don't.
Hold on. No. We're not going to say that the CFO is not creative. We're going to say that the CFO expresses her or his creativity differently, because we should not steal from the CFO.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. And maybe they're not as much of a divergent thinker as some of the others here. Okay, that's definitely a fair statement. So, but actually, again, that raises a really interesting point for you, Damani. I want to hit this same question. So, somebody had asked me recently, as a producer, sort of for lack of a better word, the power that the producer wields over the different creative partners and such. And I have always said one of the reasons that I've been successful as a producer is that I choose the right creative partners who are experts in their particular field, right? I know just enough about everything to get myself in trouble. And it's interesting because the example came up specifically about AV partners, because obviously that's been, you could argue, the most important partner over the past 16 months. And there was certainly a time where some producers would say, whatever, just throw the camera on the sticks, just get the iMag, whatever. But I think now, you said, Zoom burnout, all this stuff, you can't just throw a camera on a stick and do a static shot for an hour. So I'm assuming that now more than ever, people have been looking at you for that creative input, for that strategy. So, I mean, tell me some of the things maybe you've been seeing over the past year or so.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a year. Last year, May 18th, we produced our first virtual event. And it was 3 days, 750 attendees, 40 speakers from 5 countries and 2 islands. And it was a conference that had been IRL for a very long time. That we executed May 18th through 20th. I got the call about the conference on May 6th. Right? Right. Okay. My team is still in therapy and recovering from that reality, but we crushed it. We made it. It was absolutely amazing, and it was, to Bobby's point, what the client needed, but didn't know what they needed because none of us had done this yet. So what are we seeing now is we're seeing people who really have a desire to create experiences that are impactful. We've really leaned into virtual URL is here to stay in some capacity. There are going to be people who don't want to go back. There are going to be people who don't want to go back in person. And so now it becomes a matter of not the fact that we have to do this thing, because for the past year, we've had to do this thing. Now we're in this place where we get to say, but we get to now. We get to be more intentional. As people start to come back IRL and we start doing this hybrid thing, which ask 5 people in the events industry what hybrid means, you get 17 different responses. But as people start moving back into the IRL experience, the URL experience is still important, but it can't be an afterthought as it always has been. It can't be, to your point, Kevin, let's throw a camera up on some sticks and call it a day. It has to be, there is an unseen audience that we have to impact. I can see when Michelle is happy when I'm speaking and I look out into the audience and she's smiling and she's clapping. I can see that. I can see if Bobby's upset because he's like, I don't like that. I can't see the people on the other end of the screen, and that's okay. But it means that I have to design with intentionality, and I have to design an experience that is specific to that audience in the same way that it's specific to the IRL audience. When we were designing, and now that we are again starting to design physical events, because we are at our core still a physical event company. We do festivals and conferences and concerts and art installations and big things. When we were designing those, you had to think through every square inch of what might be seen by an individual. Bobby, you talked about it. You went to this big venue with all the lights and all the sound and all the things, because if this were an IRL space, people would come in and need to be blown away by all of that. We are in this unique place right now where we have more control over what people see than ever. You don't have to take a 50,000 square foot venue, warehouse, ballroom, backyard, and cover every square inch of it in branding and bunting and lights and sound. You don't have to. You have to control a 27-inch or a 13-inch screen space, which means that you can frame it however you want. What we're seeing is that people understand fundamentally the value that comes in creating experiences for 2 audiences, but realizing that while there are some similarities, they are 2 distinct audiences who are deserving of being thought about distinctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So now what we're going to do here, we're coming up on the end. So I'm going to ask all of y'all sort of a quick hitter question that'll set us up for the big finale that's going to leave everybody feeling fantastic and happy and inspired. So Michelle, you had touched on this earlier, and I think we can all say something similar in that we all know people from all walks of life who say, "Oh, I'm not creative," and a lot of times, like, they certainly have accepted that or adopted that, when a lot of us who might identify as creative say, "That's bupkis. Of course you're creative. You just don't see it," or maybe it just hasn't been nurtured as much as it was in me. So here's the quick hitter question. I'm going to go right down the row. When did you first realize I'm a creative person?
I was 5. I locked myself in my room and I was drawing and writing stories, and my mom was worried about me, and I was having a great time creating worlds up in my head. Nothing's changed. So
I love it. I'm glad you recognize it so early. Yeah. What about you, Damani? Were you a little later to the party?
No, I was a little later in that, you know, I always wrote. Like I said, I can't draw, but I'm a writer, and I always have been a writer. And with no arrogance, I write well, right? And so that was always my outlet, but I never saw it translate to other things. And the reason I didn't ever see it translate to other things is because of the whole imposter syndrome. I believed that creativity was put in this silo, and all these things that I did were just work, not realizing that there is the sacredness of work that aligns with the sacredness of creativity. And so for me, I'd say that creativity, for me, I recognized it probably when I was 15, and I had a high school teacher who was like, "Nah, bro, you're good." But I didn't fully walk into it until relatively recently. Within the past, I would say, ironically enough, within the past 3 years.
Yeah. It's interesting. What about you, Bobby? Were you always a creative weirdo?
I think I knew it when I started seeing things that weren't there, because it was either vision or hallucination. And professionally, I think the way it was I had been doing like the mobile DJ career, you know, crushing frat parties and middle school dances and having an absolute blast with that. And at the same time, I was dipping my toes in the world of real concert production. So I was spending summers coiling cables for minimum wage at festivals and loving it. And specifically, there was a moment where I was looking around at the level of technology that it took to run a 50,000 person concert, and I was like, how come this is like, I'm doing mobile DJing now, and I had kind of hit the ceiling of what technology could look like for a mobile DJ, and I'm like, clearly production gets so much bigger than this. How come I need to have a quote unquote real artist to justify using this level of technology? Why can't I have a DJ show that can play any of these artists and better remixes of them? And like, why can't I use these speakers? What are these speakers anyway? How do they work? And this was like 1999, and I know I'm dating myself, but do you remember the song Sandstorm? The one that goes,
yeah, Geruda, baby.
Right? That one. So that song was
rights for that.
Yeah, Boots and Cats 101 for sure. But that song was like, this was the first time like an electronic song was like crossing over into pop banger, and I was like, if I had my Discman, and again I know I'm dating myself, and plugged it into this sound system, which incidentally was the JBL 88 line array system, it would be incredible. All of these people would have an incredible time. But I don't need Darude, the person, here to play that song. Like, he deserves all the credit in the world and the royalties and all that, but little Bobby at $9 an hour with the Discman could deliver the content to pump through that technology to have the right emotional impact. And this was before DJs were rock stars, and EDM was a genre. And so that was a really important moment for me, because it seemed like the most obvious thing in the world, but there wasn't really a market for concert-sized DJ shows where the priority was the tech. And that's really what sparked my whole career.
Yeah. That's awesome. Shout out to Darude.
Yeah. If Darude, if you're watching, I appreciate you.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap this up in a nice little bow. For all those folks who are out there, I think any creative person will say that it's a roller coaster. You know, we are not all firing on all cylinders every single day with big ideas and the next $1 million concept, right? You hit your highs and your lows. So we're going to try to send out a message maybe of positivity here. And I'm going to ask each one of you this. What do you do to keep inspired, or in those moments maybe where you're just not feeling inspired, what do you lean on to get inspired? I'm going to start with you, Michelle.
Having conversations with my other creative friends or people I've just met, like all of you. I'm feeling inspired just having these conversations. Again, like stepping away, getting out, putting yourself in a different environment. And I don't think that you can necessarily invoke inspiration, on a dime, push a button. I wish I could. And I would give myself a break and say, I'm not feeling inspired today, but tomorrow I'm going to go shoot some film photography. I don't want to ever stay in a state of not being inspired, because then it gets a little bit dangerous. It's my, it's the gas, the engine, the gas that keeps me going. So I need to eventually get more of that. So give myself a break. I cut myself a break, and then I get out there, even if I'm not feeling like it, and I play some records. I shoot some photography. Maybe I'm not designing, but I'm doing something. Just keep going.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Damani?
Well, first I want to say that if a person could be my spirit animal, Michelle, it would be you. You are, DJ, photographer, psychology, art school, guitars in the back. What? Like, what are we doing here right now? And also,
we'll collaborate.
You're wearing the color orange. Yeah, you're wearing the color orange, which is my favorite color. So I get inspired by just watching things, right? There are some really creative places around my house that are broken. There's this area called Fabrication Yard. Fabrication Yard is Dallas's only legal graffiti park. And when I say legal graffiti park, it's not like, it just means that the cops aren't going to arrest you if you tag there. And what's interesting about it is that this is a cropping of abandoned, dilapidated, falling apart, roof caving in buildings, tin buildings. And there's this code that exists there. There's a code between the artists where they go and they support each other. And the beautiful thing about it being a street art facility is that the art that I saw earlier this week, because I probably go about 2-3 times a week, honestly, with my children oftentimes in spray cans. But the art that I saw 2-3 days ago will not be there tomorrow when I have a meeting. It won't be, because someone has gone over it, and that's okay. The artist that did the first piece doesn't come back and get mad at the artist that did the second piece. The artist that did the first piece says, I respect your art. I respect what you've done. Now I'm going to create something new on top of that. So for me, inspiration comes from being able to walk through, but it's not just the art that's created. It's the fact that these artists have chosen to take something that is undesirable, that is unworthy, that is unloved, that is cast aside by society, and said, no, not only am I going to make it beautiful, I'm not going to make it beautiful by covering it up. I'm going to make it beautiful by enhancing the cracks. That is where inspiration comes. How do we enhance the cracks of the experiences of the broken things in our parts of the worlds that we create? How do we enhance those cracks? Because when we enhance the cracks, we find ourselves inspired, and we can then, I think, inspire those that are around us.
Yeah, fantastic. Bobby, bring us home. What do you do when you're in a rut and you got to be creative and inspired?
I love the idea of what everybody's been saying so far. Michelle talked about the importance of creating that space and letting in whatever's coming. And I think I totally agree with that. Now, I think a lot of us have struggled with having more downtime than we like sometimes in the last few years. And it's easy to let that drag you down. But even when things are crazy, I feel really strongly about time management and knowing what tasks I need to get done just to keep the business running. And those are necessary, but not particularly creative or inspiring. So part of why I like to time manage so hard is to bundle those all up into efficient blocks and then have, okay, Tuesday's nothing. Tuesday's open format. I'm going to create that space and protect it and see what comes of it. And that has been huge. And that's where some of these ideas that have kept us afloat in the last year have come from. So being comfortable with space, not feeling down about having an empty day or an empty hour, and embracing whatever direction your mind takes and noticing what's working. And then sometimes that's all the inspiration you need.
That's great. That's great. Well, I want to thank all of you, the three of you, so much for being here with us today. This has been an honor and a privilege for me. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your energy, making me laugh a little bit. I really appreciate that. Certainly, we want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank the Search Foundation as well. I encourage everyone who's watching this, stay tuned. Check out the social media networks for upcoming events. Check out the website. And let's just keep talking. Let's have conversations. Let's all of us in this industry continue to share and ideate together. And with that, I would like to thank you one last time from me and from the Northwest Events Show. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon.